Right, we're on to, well, I think I've welcomed you. I hope I've welcomed you, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. So we're on item 2, which is an update from Becky Reynolds, who is from Baines Public Health. So Becky, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hale. As you said, I'm Becky Reynolds. I'm a consultant in public health working in the Council's Public Health Department. So I think Bruce Lawrence usually attends these. He's not able to come along tonight, so I'm here in his place. So giving an overview of where we are with COVID at the moment in Bath and North East Somerset. Well, we're starting to see, just the last few days, starting to see a little bit of a levelling off in the number of detected cases in England and in Baines. It's a bit too early to say whether that's a trend that's going to continue as we head towards winter, but it is positive to see for however long we have it. In Baines, we have something called a 7-day rate per 100,000, which is 218, which is below the England rate, which is 245. And in terms of interpreting what that means, because you often hear that 7-day rate quoted in the media, the 7-day rate for England or the 7-day rate for a local authority, what that means is the number of new positive cases confirmed in the past 7 days for every 100,000 of your population. So ours is 218. So for every 100,000 of our population over the past 7 days, we had 218 new cases. So almost double that because we've got a population of about 192. So it's dropped slightly over the past few days. A few days ago, it was higher than the England rate, which was concerning to us all. But now it's dropped a little bit below it. So we'll see as time goes on whether we've leveled off now for a period of time, or whether our rates will go up again. The Southwest 7-day rate is 169, so that's even lower than the England 7-day rate. And generally speaking, towns and cities that have got universities have got higher 7-day rates. They've got a higher proportion of younger adults. And so we see higher rates in Bristol, although that's also because of their the closeness of their population living together, and also around Exeter Way and other university towns. So it's positive to see we've had a slight drop in that. If I just sort of think across all the different settings, although our cases had risen and now have just dropped slightly and might be levelling off, it's not as a result of seeing 1 or 2 major outbreaks. So we're not seeing major outbreaks in any area. Quite a few weeks ago now, you'll have remembered from the news the outbreak that we had in the sort of Midsummer Norton Poulton area. We haven't had a community outbreak like that since then. What we're seeing is a steady increase across the board in the number of organisations that are seeing cases of COVID. So for example, in our schools, over the last couple of weeks in particular, we have seen quite a large increase in the numbers of schools who are reporting cases of COVID, either staff or pupils. Generally, on the whole, it's 1 or 2 cases, occasionally a few more, generally brought in from the community, and we're not really seeing spread between pupils and between members of staff in the school where that happens. So we're seeing an increase in the numbers of schools reporting to us, but not an increase in large outbreaks and big transmission within an individual school. Schools have got the Department for Education helpline, where they've got a coronavirus helpline set up. So the expectation is that if a school has a case, a single case, that it phones the DFE helpline and gets talked through it gets asked a number of questions to help the school head teacher identify which pupils or which bubbles need to self-isolate and which members of staff need to self-isolate for 14 days. Similarly with care homes, we're seeing cases of COVID in care homes, usually amongst staff. In the last week, we've had a couple of providers where we've seen 1 or 2 cases in residents, but on the whole, it's been staff. Usually 1 case, sometimes 2. But again, generally, once COVID's got into the care home, we're not seeing that awful spread that we saw back in March, April time of COVID rapidly spreading amongst vulnerable residents in the care home. So I think there's been a lot of learning, and huge credit to care homes for the infection prevention and control processes they've put in place. Our adult social care team have also got a big important role that they play in providing support and being very quick to note when a care home has got a case and offering supports to them and doing a risk assessment about whether the care home needs to close to visitors and or residents. And we've also had, for the last couple of months, an infection prevention and control team who's been able, as soon as a care home has got a case, to be able to contact the care home manager, offer training, offer advice, talk them through the processes that they have in place around preventing infections, environmental cleaning, wearing personal protective equipment, and support them where they may have areas where they can improve. We also hold every 2 weeks a multidisciplinary team meeting that brings together lots of organisations that support and work with care homes to focus on IP&C, infection prevention and control practices in care homes, again, and working with the care home manager, again, to think, what are you doing well and how can we support you as a care home to strengthen your IP&C practices? In terms of our 2 universities, a couple of weeks ago, we did start to see a spike in the number of cases reported by the University of Bath, and that was reported in the media. So what we did at that time then was have an urgent meeting on the same day with Public Health England's health protection team to talk through and to make sure and find out whether or not there were any outbreaks happening in halls of residence that we weren't aware of. And we felt reassured that there weren't. But what we had changed at that time was the process by which the council notifies the universities of young adults aged 19 to 24 who could be students. So that resulted in a large number of cases that the university weren't previously aware of. Since then, the University of Bath is reporting about 12 to 13 confirmed cases each day, and they report their figures on their website. And Bath Spa University reports sort of 25 to 30 cases per week, so a much smaller number, as you'd expect, because they are a smaller university, and have a higher proportion of students who live and have always lived in Baines. In terms of hospitals, because that's such a key trigger, isn't it, if our hospitals become under such pressure that they can't treat all the other conditions that they need to because of the pressure put on them by COVID, patients with COVID. So they've currently got about 25 confirmed cases of COVID, and just under half of that are Baines patients. They've recently, in the last couple of weeks, opened their COVID ward because their numbers have increased. The issue that the hospital has is being able to discharge patients back to their homes, and that's an issue related to difficulties that providers are finding and being able to recruit to enablement type staff. So often patients, when they are discharged home, they need some reablement support for a period of time. But because generally there's such a feeling amongst the population that generally speaking, a lot of people don't want to go to care homes. If they need additional support, they want to stay in their homes and have additional support coming to their home, largely because of COVID and sadly the number of deaths that we saw much earlier in the year. That means then that there is a staffing shortage amongst some of our providers for those reablement type staffing roles. So the hospital is looking at that with the clinical commissioning group. The other thing I just wanted to briefly talk about is mass testing, because I'm sure you'll have seen a lot about that on the news over the last couple of days, particularly in relation to the universities. There are a whole load of new technologies that are coming out now around mass testing. And the mass testing is a bit of a confusing term because a lot of the pilots that are happening are actually with small groups of people, not mass tests. So we've got the Liverpool mass testing that you'll have seen on the news, but there are also pilots going on down in Devon and Cornwall around looking at testing asymptomatic healthcare professionals who visit care homes regularly to see if they can be part of these new testing technologies. Also looking at a pilot, there's also a pilot going on or about to start, not in Baines, to look at being able to test relatives of care home relatives to find out whether that is something that can be taken forward. So those aren't mass testing, but it's around testing people who don't have symptoms, asymptomatic testing. So that's coming our way nationally, all these new technologies. On the one hand, it's great that we've got new technologies. There's a whole lot of stuff that hasn't been worked out yet. So our universities are having to respond in the next few days about whether they want to submit an expression of interest to test or to offer testing to all of their university students before they go home for Christmas. but there are over 20,000 students. So there's a huge logistical exercise around that, and a whole load of unanswered questions as yet, because it's a national process being put in place. And at the moment, the logistics around it aren't there. How you test such large numbers of people, where you test them, who does the testing, how do the students get the results, how do those results get fed into the national database system of over 20,000 students, should they all choose to take it up. So lots of unanswered questions, but that's going to be happening quite quickly. So I think if I was just to sum up, Chair, I would say that it's good that we're able to see some levelling off in BANES of data, of the number of cases. I think what we need to be really careful of is that that doesn't change our messaging about it is so important still, especially as we move towards winter and people are inside much more, and when lockdown comes off, that people do self-isolate when they're symptomatic. They do get a test, and if they need support to self-isolate, then they do look to how they can get access to support, whether it's from Compassionate Communities Hub or from welfare, financial welfare support. But it's so important that we don't slacken off all that sort of good work and the work that people are doing to continue social distancing, get tested and self-isolate. I think I'll pause there if I may, but very happy to take any questions, however you'd like to take it.
Thank you, Becky. Thank you for the councillor bit, but let's not do that all the way through, folks. I'm Alan. I'm much more comfortable with that. So any questions? I've got 3 screens here. Well, I've only got 1 screen, but 3. Nothing has appeared on the chat.
Yeah, sorry.
Alan,
sorry.
yeah, Karen wants to speak.
Sorry, who?
Me, Alan.
Karen Walker wants to speak.
Hang on, we got lots and lots. Have you got a list there, Sarah?
Yeah, we're just going to go through the screens now, but Karen's first, and we'll send you a note.
Sorry, Karen.
So, thank you, Alan, for allowing me to speak. Just one question really for Becky is the data that you've just given us, from what dates are they? From the beginning till, is it yesterday, a week before? So it's, you know, when is this data being collected?
So the BANES 7-day rates are the most up-to-date rates. So every 9 o'clock we get an update. Every 9 o'clock at night we get an update. So I've taken this from yesterday's. Okay. There's then a lag of 3 days. So it's the 7 days before 3 days ago, if that makes sense. There's a lag because sometimes the tests continue to come through. So it is the most recent date that's available. Brilliant. And it's also available on the national PHE dashboard.
That's lovely. Thank you, Becky.
Okay, thank you, Karen.
Alan, the next one I think is Nick Duncan.
Okay, Nick.
Good evening, one and all. Just a question. I've heard about not mass testing, but group testing, where you put everybody's test into one pot, and then you say 60, and then you do a batch of 60 at a time. See if you got anybody in that 60. Are we doing that yet, or has that been discarded?
So there are a number of different testing technologies for asymptomatic testing. So is that what you're talking about? So you might choose to do 60 people who don't have any symptoms and send them all off, and however they manage them in the laboratory about analysing them.
No, I was listening to the BBC and they were saying they were putting maybe 60 in, and if they weren't positive, then that meant that's 60. Rather than testing 60, you were doing 1 test at a time.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's really, I haven't heard of that, to be honest, and it's not come through to me yet from the Department for Health and Social Care. But so I will keep an eye out for that. But as I say, it's not come to us from the Department for Health and Social Care. So it's certainly not something that we're looking at the moment to implement. But the testing fields, the testing landscape is changing so rapidly and so quickly. Things are happening all the time, or information's coming out very quickly. So I'll keep an eye out for that. But no notification has come through to the public health team about that yet.
Alan, we've got Eleanor and then Ron.
All yours, Eleanor.
I'm a bit confused about what a councillor should do if they see a flagrant breach, what they think is a flagrant breach of what seems to be the interpretation of the rules. I'm thinking in particular of a school of dance which is operating as though there was no COVID crisis at all, with the pupils going in and out and doing the, dancing in the hall. And I can't really see how this is allowed, and yet you can't play golf or singles tennis.
So there is a number, and I have noticed that I think Denise is on the call, so she may know what this number is. If someone sees a breach, and there is a number that they can report it through to, and within capacity, it will be investigated. Do you mind me asking you, Denise, if you happen to know it? Only because I know you spent a lot of time on the rota, so you may be able to have that on hand. If you don't, I can forward that, find it, and put it on the chat.
I don't know it offhand, the top of my head, Becky, but I'll have a look while you're talking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. Ron, whichever Ron is. Or...
Hi, Ron Hopkins. Just an overarching question, which a couple of people have been asking me they're concerned about. Has Baines had any news or any planning for mass vaccinations? Has that dropped across anybody's desk yet, or is it too soon?
Yes, no, absolutely. So planning for mass vaccinations, which is led by the Clinical Commissioning Group in terms of planning, has been happening for quite a few weeks now. And there are different elements to it. There's the mass vaccination side, where they're planning to have sites, and they're just looking at where they might be across Baines, Swindon and Wiltshire for mass vaccination, as well as having GP practice call and recall systems, so asking specific groups based very much on the flu eligibility to come for vaccine. So the planning has very much been happening for a while, because local clinical commissioning groups have been expected to have plans in place to be able to deliver from early December. It's obviously ratcheted up quite a bit with what sounds like fairly positive news from the trial that's come out. But yes, so the clinical commissioning group lead on that. And the directors of public health across the 3 local authorities are involved in that. So there are plans ongoing.
Thank you, Becky. Dina, did you throw your hand up, or was that in disgust? Or
no, it wasn't in disgust. No, I was just going to say I've got a webinar call with the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care on Friday. So I was just going to say that if anyone's got any questions that they would like raised there, just to if you want to email them over to me, that would be great.
Chairman. Chairman, can you hear me?
So who is it?
That's Ron Hopkins again.
Ron Hopkins, Chairman.
Yeah,
my concern is just, I raised the question because obviously we're here in the Somer Valley complex in terms of Baines, and with a very desperate and disparate resident population around a lot of remote areas. I wonder whether that's being incorporated in the plan for max vaccination. That's all, really.
Well, I think there isn't an answer to that at this moment, Ron.
Okay.
So perhaps again pose that question to Dina. We're gonna try and move on. Could I just say that the screen I'm looking at has got 25 faces on it, and there's another 2 screens I think to the right. So when you do come forward, please identify yourself, because I just cannot pick 1 out of 25.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to move on now to item 3, which is an update from Miriam Woolnough, Somer Valley Rediscovered Project Manager. Miriam, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. Apologies to the Keynsham Forum members that is predominantly, I'll be speaking predominantly about Somer Valley, but I hope you'll still find it interesting. So I'm Miriam. I'm the project manager for Somer Valley Rediscovered, which is a landscape scale project located in the Somer Valley. It's essentially a people and nature project. We're aiming to improve biodiversity in the area, and also to improve people's health and well-being. So it's very much about working with communities to make better connections to their local green spaces. and wildlife. And it's both about the physical connections, about visiting those sites more, but it's also about the emotional connections, sort of that excitement about nature and that pride of place. As well as nature, we're also looking at heritage too. Obviously, the industrial history of the Somer Valley has had a huge influence on the landscape and on the communities. And it's also an important area in geological terms as well. So I took up post in late February, and it's fair to say that this year hasn't exactly gone as we had planned it to. However, I do feel that one thing that COVID has done is to really emphasise the importance of good quality local green space. And it's also emphasised the benefit that spending time in natural places has on both our physical and mental health. I mean, how many of us have discovered new walks and places to visit during the lockdowns, and I spent time outside to help cope with the strange times that we've found ourselves in. So Somer Valley Rediscovered is led by Baines Council, by Baines Public Health, by Wessex Water and Natural England. And I'm very much in the development phase of this project. So I'm spending a lot of time talking to organisations such as town and parish councils, local interest groups, ward councillors. Spent a lot of time on Zoom, it has to be said, over the past few months. Because we're focusing on health as well as environment, we're also talking to the health sector too. And Somer Valley Rediscovered is very much about working in partnership with people. So it's looking at supporting projects that might be already partly underway or be current aspirations, as much as developing new projects. One of the projects that I'm working on that is already underway is being led by Wessex Water, who are currently looking at innovative ways to reduce levels of pharmaceuticals in watercourses. They're currently running a pilot project in the Somer Valley to promote green social prescribing as an alternative to prescribed medication where appropriate. And I've got a colleague, Jane Wright at Natural England, who's focusing specifically on this element of the project. So from all the scoping work that I'm doing, I'm going to be putting together a costed action plan, which can then be used to take funding bids. So just to give you a kind of an idea of kinds of projects that we're looking at, the sorts of things that we might be looking at are wildlife habitat creation and restoration, both on council-owned land and also working with private landowners. Physical access improvements to green spaces, so improving paths and gateways and so on and so forth. Potentially setting up and supporting volunteer groups to manage green spaces. Promoting local walks and places to visit, be it by leaflets or online presence, etc., etc. Interpretation projects, increasing the amount of opportunities for green social prescribing. So it's very much looking at a programme of projects that achieve those dual aims of biodiversity and health and well-being. So once that scoping work has been done, we'll be looking at various sources of funding, potentially including National Lottery Heritage Fund, possibly opportunities that arise through the West of England Owned Authority with green infrastructure. I suspect there'll be a sort of one funding source. I suspect various different projects will be funded in different ways. But I'm very keen to try and make sure that there's a sustainability element to this, so that we're not just looking at funding projects for a few years while grant from the lottery or whatever, but looking at ways of making some of these projects ongoing, basically. So this work links in really closely with the climate and ecological emergency that Jane is going to talk about in a few minutes. I feel that Somer Valley Rediscovered would be very well placed to deliver some of the actions which have been identified to combat the emergencies. We're also one of 7 strategic green infrastructure projects identified by the West of England through their joint infrastructure plan. And we also fit into work around the West of England Nature Recovery Network. On the public health side, there are targets, particularly around obesity and mental health, that we'll be working with the public health team to achieve. So that's a very quick overview of the project. We are planning a webinar in January to look at the project in more detail, and this will be promoted via the area forum. Very happy for people to get in touch if you'd like to know more or you'd like to be involved. As I said, we're still in the development scoping phase at the moment, so there's still plenty of time to be involved. And I'll put my contact details in the chat so that my contact details are available. So thank you for listening. And if there's any question, if there's time to answer any questions, then I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Miriam. If there are, we'll just take no more than 2, so we can try and keep Sorry?
Alan, we've got a question from Scott in the chat. So Scott, did you want to ask your question? The question reads, I'll read it out. I've lost it now. Where are we?
Are Wessex trialling the removal of
go on, Alison, go on.
Are Wessex trialling the removal of chemicals from the water, or just suggesting prescribing less?
So Wessex Water are looking at this because they recognise there is an increasing problem with finding traces of pharmaceuticals in watercourses, and to deal with that at the sewage treatment works, it's very expensive to deal with it, and it's also not 100% effective either if you do deal with it that way. So their project is looking at ways, other ways of reducing the amount going in to the watercourse in the first place, and also recognising that by trialling projects such as green social prescribing, there's lots of other benefits that come out of green social prescribing, as well as a potential reduction of pharmaceuticals in the watercourses. But it's quite, I guess it's quite a new approach, although it's fair to say that social prescribing is gaining more and more interest nationally.
Thank you, Miriam.
Alan, we have 2 more questions in the chat, one from Nick Duncan and Eleanor Jackson. So I don't know if you want to take those 2, and then you might want to move on.
Okay, it will be just those 2. Hopefully it will be a relatively straightforward answer, because we have an additional speaker coming in after you, Miriam. Eleanor. Unmute, Eleanor.
The big problem with the streams in Radstock is the discharges into them by farmers, farming fertilizers. Is anything being done about fertilizers, which I would have thought in terms of volume were more harmful than pharmaceuticals?
So part of the project is looking at is working with landowners to try and increase biodiversity, but it's a whole package really. So potentially we could be working with groups like the Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group, and also the Bristol Avon Rivers Trust, BART, both of whom work with landowners to try and farm in more environmentally friendly ways. So it is part of the project as well.
Thank you very much. Sorry, was it somebody called Ron?
No, sorry.
Nick. It was Nick.
It's Nick Duncan.
Yeah.
Nick, right. Nick.
I was a councillor down in Devon, in Torrington, and I created a tree walk for aesthetic. So we cleared areas for people to look at trees, sit with them, hug them if they need to, or paint and draw them. Have you thought about something like on the internet, key trees you have aesthetic beauty for you to promote green healing?
Yeah, And that's a really good idea. I mean, one thing I've really noticed around the Somer Valley area is some of the veteran trees that we've got. There's some incredibly fine oak trees out there. So yeah, no, I think it's a good idea, and yeah, I'll take that one on board.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Miriam. We're going to move on now, folks. I'm terribly sorry, but otherwise we'll drift. John, would you like to give us an update on the police, please?
Hello, thank you, Alan. Thank you, Alan, and good evening, everyone. I'm only going to report in relation to Keynsham this evening. I can't say anything for the Radstock, Midsummer Norton area. There's not a massive amount to report, really. In terms of COVID, we are working with Baines Council at the moment in a multi-agency fashion in relation to assessing what is happening in terms of hotspots for breaches and other issues. That's working with Linda Dean. We have a morning meeting every single day at 8:45 to discuss any hotspot issues that the police could deal with, or the Baines Council could deal with in terms of enforcement in relation to premises who may or may not be breaching, and how the marshals are used as well. So we have quite close contact with Baines in relation to that kind of work at the moment. In terms of breaches in the Keynsham area, and that's Keynsham in the Chew Valley, we've had 32 breaches in the last 7 days, about 3 in the Chew Valley. So most of them are in the Keynsham area. Most of them as a hotspot is the High Street, where we have some groups of young people gathering, and some issues with licensed premises. That would be one of the main reasons for our breaches at the moment. We do have licensing visits ongoing very recently and still to happen, not clearly during the lockdown because they're not open at the moment, but we will be paying a lot more attention to the licensed premises, and some of them been served letters in relation to them being more stringent in their actions and protection in relation to any kind of COVID issues within the premises. In relation to the children, we've spoken to some of the parents, and we can't ticket children for COVID related things. And we, unfortunately, I would say we haven't had to ticket anyone in Keynsham as far as I know, because people do take the advice from us when we come across people and give them a friendly nudge in terms of their behaviour. Children are a bit different. Clearly we can't ticket children, but potentially we can ticket parents. So we have had to speak to parents on several occasions now in relation to the behaviour of their children. Hopefully they'll take that on board and understand that everyone has a role to play in this in regards to everyone's safety. So we've been working towards that at the moment. Normally I would at this point give you some kind of comparison of facts and figures from last year to this. At the moment, because we're in lockdown, there's going to be no value in me doing that. So I haven't done that today. Essentially because as soon as we get a lockdown, reported crime can drop by as much as 50% or more. In actual fact, in the last lockdown, the numbers of logs, our reported, the login system that we have where crimes are reported or calls for service are made by the public to the police, diminished substantially. It's not quite the same at the moment, but it has dropped off a great deal. So to give you any kind of comparison would be pointless. So I haven't done that. So that is a good thing at the moment for Keynsham, that crime is significantly down at the moment. But that doesn't mean that our workload has changed massive amount, certainly not in the neighbourhood policing team. Keynsham has become a lot bigger. And in fact, I think I was talking to Brian Simmons just the other day about an issue about COVID type issues, and talking about the estates that have grown up now on the fringes of Keynsham are filled with new residents, new citizens in Keynsham, and because there are more people, it creates more issues as people sometimes don't get along as neighbours do. And so, in fact, our work has probably increased somewhat, not due to COVID, but just due to the nature of the increase of population in Keynsham. So it is nice that things have become a lot more quieter under lockdown. They will get back to normal again quite soon after the lockdown, but we are still busy dealing with everything else that is going on at the moment.
John, thank you for that update. I would have asked the question, have the numbers gone up as far as police officers are concerned, but that's a silly question. So we'll thank you very much, John, and we'll move on.
Alan, we've got two questions, one from Liz Hardman and Eleanor Jackson.
Right. Liz, go on then.
Hi, apologies for being late, and also apologies if this has been asked earlier. What powers do these COVID marshals actually have? Do they just warn people, or give some sort of report on them? Or I just wonder, what powers do they have to actually enforce anything?
Unfortunately, I can't answer that question. I don't work directly with the marshals, but hopefully I think someone is put their hand up to say that they can.
Dina, I think you're going to tell us they haven't got anything.
That's absolutely correct, Chair. Yes, they have no powers, but they're part of the work that goes around engagement and encouragement on people to do the right thing. If they're in a situation where they need more enforcement, or they need, you know, some other people, then they'll obviously call on the police or even our public protection officers.
Thank you, Dina. Eleanor?
Well, I'm just a bit surprised, because what we've seen in the Norton Radstock area is a great upsurge in vandalism on the one hand, and it really upsets me that vandals broke into the Methodist Church in Radstock and smashed up the organ on Friday night. That's one, and stole a lot of equipment. That's one point. They keep assaulting the Swallows Cafe very close to where I live, and so it goes on. And the other thing is the reports we've been having about increased drug consumption and growth of county lines, and surely that's not unique to the Soma Valley. It's also a problem in Keynsham, or is it? Have you got on top of it?
Well, I can't speak to, as I said before, I can't speak about anything particular in the Soma Valley area. I don't have any information or knowledge about that, I'm afraid. So I apologise that no one from the Soma Valley's come along this evening to answer those questions.
No, what I'm asking is whether you've got the problem in Keynsham.
No, we don't. There's a simple answer. We don't have a county lines problem in Keynsham. My general understanding in relation to drugs supply and drugs use is that it actually went down certainly over the last lockdown, because there are so few people around. The street market, which is where most drugs are bought or sold, disappeared because people disappeared from the street, and it made things a lot more easy for the police to identify people that may have been up to no good in relation to street dealing. So my understanding is in Baines, but I don't have any specific figures to back that up, is that the drug taking issues had gone down a lot in Baines, but that is only during the lockdown. Of course, things change over a period of time, but we certainly don't have any county lines in Keynsham. It's something that I've mentioned. It's something I've mentioned before in these meetings, probably about a year ago, because there are certain indicators to it, and we know what the indicators are now. And so when we do get any kind of indicator, my team will look to identify whether that is a genuine indicator or not. Fortunately, so far, there have been no genuine indicators in relation to county lines in Keynsham.
Thank you, John. We are moving on. Nick, I understand Avon Fire and Rescue want to give a report.
Yes, I've been asked, can I, because I'm on duty today, can I give you a report compiled by Another Watch, if that's okay with you? So
yeah, carry on, please.
Yeah, so for Keynsham Community Forum, I've got a number of community fire safety activities over the last 3 months. Home fire safety visits are 29, school visits were 2, and community education events, which are usually scouts or something, that's 1. Obviously, that's slowed down a bit because we're not going into people's houses, we're not having meetings, but that will take off again when we when this hopefully is all over. But we will be carrying out home fire safety visits. If we have an incident nearby, we always ask if everybody got smoke alarms and fit them. So if you just keep a word out to everybody, if they haven't got smoke alarms, we'll try and fit them when we can, because we don't want to impinge on other people at this time. Fire incidents, so deliberate vehicle fires. Last 2018-19, we had 6. We had 5 from April 19 to March 20, so that we're down 1 car fire, which is good. Deliberate small fires, again we're down 3, 19 in this last year. Deliberate large non-vehicle fires were 7, that was down 1. Accidental dwelling fires are 13, the same as the year before. Other fire incidents, of which I can't tell you what they're made up of, was an increase of 2 to 34. Non-fire emergency incidents down 7 to 74. False alarm incidents are up 3, 187, and total number of incidents attended were 337, which is -4. So I've had a station manager's report with the recent pandemic of our COVID-19 responses has been strong throughout. We still maintain a high level of response, adding that we have again just agreed a service to assist partners in SWAST with additional fire service drivers to help with their needs locally. As a station, we have not experienced noticeable spikes in fires or fire calls in general and maintain a good level of response. National campaign, as the nights draw in, AIM Fire Rescue Service are working with universities, the police and key agencies to deliver safety messages concerning water, fire and personal safety. I will also say a lot of people probably haven't been driving a lot this year. So maybe if you just make them all aware, just be careful if you haven't been driving at night or fog, because now it's all drawing in sort of thing. So just be a bit more aware when you're driving, that's all. If anybody's got any questions, I'll try and answer them.
I don't think there appears to be, Nick, so I am going to move on, but can I first of all say thank you to you and your guys, and the same for John. Thank you for what you do for us. Because you're the ones out there.
Alan, Andy Waite is waving, so I assume that means he would like to speak, if that's all right.
Yes, thank you. I did put MIS in the chat thing, but I won't bore you with that. It's a very simple question. I was just interested. We just had firework. I wouldn't call it night exactly because it seems to go on for longer than one night. I just wondered how this year compared with an average year in terms of your activities.
I wouldn't be able to give you the answer to that because I wasn't on firework night, so I wouldn't be able to give you the statistics. That'll probably take a month or 2 to come through. What I tend to find is the summer is far, far busier than bonfire night. People seem to think bonfire night is really, really bad. To be honest, the summer when kids are off, it's far, far worse. We have a lot of grass fires and that's, I find we're busier in the summer with grass fires and rubbish fires rather than a bonfire night. Obviously this summer that was severely reduced due to COVID. That's my personal experience.
Thank you, Nick. We are going to move on now. Next up is climate emergency, and I'm going to introduce Jane Wildblood from the council, who is Corporate and Community Sustainability Manager, and she's going to be supported by Councillor Sarah Warren, who is the Cabinet Member for Climate Emergency and Neighbourhood Services. And there will be an opportunity for a few questions at the end of their presentation. So Sarah and Jane, over to you.
Hello.
Sarah's there. Good.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? So I'm having some problems with my internet bandwidth this evening, so that's why I've got my camera switched off, and if you stop being able to hear me, Jane will have to just take over. But I just wanted to say hello and thank you for inviting Jane and myself to give you an update on our work on the environmental emergency. I've really enjoyed hearing about the Summer Valley Rediscovered project, and I look forward to hearing about any other local projects that people want to update us about. So we last came along to both of your forums almost a year ago, before the pandemic struck, when we told you about the research the council had commissioned into the climate emergency that had identified our top 3 priorities for carbon emissions reductions, which were firstly about boosting renewable energy generation, secondly, improving the energy efficiency of buildings, and thirdly, reducing transport emissions by shifting away from the car and ensuring that the remaining cars are electric as far as possible. And then this summer just gone, the council further declared an ecological emergency, following on in Bristol's footsteps, which is in response to the extremely high and rising rate of extinctions, bearing in mind how important biodiversity is to support our way of life. And we're now putting together a project plan to identify exactly how we'll respond to that new priority alongside climate concerns. And of course, it's been an incredibly unusual year, with a devastating impact of the pandemic on lots of our local businesses. So some of what we've been working on, that Jane will tell you more about in the last 6 months, is of course what we hadn't anticipated at all, but is about how we can hold on to the changes that we've made in our lives over the last few months that have reduced our impact on the environment, such as using our bicycles more and working from home, and also finding ways to rebuild our local economy with a lower carbon footprint than before. So built around shorter supply chains with less vehicle travel, and ensuring that we keep the money circulating locally a bit more, which we're calling our green renewal. And the other thing to say is that when we visited you before, we were on the point of running a big public engagement event at the Guildhall, which was of course cancelled because of lockdown. So we've moved online like everybody else, and we've run a range of webinars on topics relating to the environmental emergency, most of which you should be able to find on the council's webpage if you want to go back and catch up. So with all that, I'll hand over to Jane, who's got lots more initiatives, and then internet permitting, I shall be around afterwards to take any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Sarah, can you put my slides up onto the screen? Thank you. So just as the slides come up, just to follow on from what Sarah was saying. So as you know, we submitted a plan to the October council meeting last year, and we came and visited all of you shortly afterwards to talk about what that meant. And if you could move to the next slide, Sarah. As Sarah says, is that we were on the verge of doing quite a lot of things in the March-April period, but obviously COVID had an impact, because it had an impact on everything that the council was doing. So that has slowed down the plan that we had originally put in place. But I'm pleased to be able to say that we are now getting back on track with climate action. And I think the really important thing to emphasise is that in the corporate strategy that was published in February and then updated in July, this core policy, the one of only 2 core policies about addressing the climate and nature emergency, is absolutely still the council's objective. There's no deviation from that. And in fact, as Sarah was pointing out just now, and actually as Miriam was saying when she was talking about the Summer Valley rediscovery project, is that actually there are some aspects of what we want to do on the climate and nature emergency that have actually come into sharper focus, and people have realized how very important doing those, how much even more important doing those things are to all of us and to future health and well-being. So there's there's not a lot of positives to take out of COVID, but that is one of them. And I will come back and explain a bit more about the renewal program that is on there on the slide, and which Sarah mentioned. But first of all, I'm just going to go, if we go on to the next slide, just to give you a quick update, because some of this stuff is in the public domain, but not all of it. And so I thought it would just be worth running through what action has been taking place. And there has been quite a lot going on amongst different services that is helping us to deliver on the commitments that we made in October to act on the climate emergency. So the first one, which you may well be familiar with, is that we are in the midst of developing a local plan partial review. And that is driven by the need to bring some of our planning policies up to date or make them or extend them in terms of their ambition based on the climate and ecological emergencies that we've declared. So you'll be hearing more about that. I believe that the consultation process will begin fairly early on in the new year. So look out for that because there will be policies there that I think you'll be interested in from your different areas and want to comment on. But as I say, they are very much about trying to get us a planning framework that really helps everyone who lives in our community and all the different key players to be able to do their bit more easily in terms of those key objectives around reducing carbon emissions from the built environment, from any kind of building, to increase renewable energy and to make it easier for people to travel in more sustainable ways. And you'll be familiar with most of these transport projects, I'm sure. This is a really big area of work that the council has really progressed on a lot recently around this idea of livable neighbourhoods, which is very much not about saying you can't use your cars anymore, but it is about saying let's recognise the negative impacts that car use is having on our other freedoms around and being able to walk around safely and to use and to cycle and for children to play in the streets, as well as obviously air quality. So there's been a really extensive consultation on the principles around that, which is just closed, and I think you're going to see a lot more in terms of what that specific projects coming out of the Livable Neighbourhoods initiative next year. And we've been consulting around related things around how to do electric vehicle charging, how to make that easier, where to put it, that kind of thing, and how to and we've been consulting people on expanding residence parking, which will contribute to those things. And of course we've got the clean air zone, slightly delayed, but coming in next year to help keep those dirtier vehicles, not cars, but the vans and so on off our roads. And then in terms of housing, there's been a lot of work done recently to, those of you that have been around a while may remember that we have something called the Energy at Home Advice Service, which used to be a bigger project and is now expanding again because of green homes grants that have been made available by the government, and this authority, that the housing team have done really well. So they're expanding the Energy at Home Advice Service, which you can access from our website. So if you've got parishioners who need advice about making their homes more energy efficient, especially with the weather getting colder now, then do direct them towards the Energy at Home Advice Service, where there are new grants available. Some of the government money is ring fenced for people with lower incomes, and they can get a grant of up to £10,000 to make them at home energy efficient under this new government scheme, and those who are better off can get up to £5,000. So do use that. That's really important part of trying to get our existing housing stock into better condition, and that improves not just the carbon emissions, but is very much about improving the quality of people's lives and reducing the health impact of cold homes. So that's really good progress that's been going on in terms of delivery, despite some of the delays that we had around COVID. So if we could move to my next slide, I just want to talk a bit about some of the work that's been going on in the community, my team did a survey before lockdown. I think the survey went out in January time, and we sent it out to everyone we knew, all of our networks. We put it out on social media, and it was basically a questionnaire asking people what group, people from groups that were involved in organising groups of all different sorts, what they were interested in terms of what they'd been doing in terms of action related to the climate emergency. And what that's enabled us to do is to sort of map all the different activity that's going on across the district. And the purpose of this was to provide some information that would help us to encourage organisations to collaborate with each other, to share information, so that groups that have got more experience could be helping groups that are just getting off the ground. And I think what's really interesting from this slide here is how many, I think that there's a tendency to think that the climate issue is the domain of groups that have been set up specifically around environmental issues, but actually what you're seeing there is it is much broader than that. And I think that's, you know, we knew that, I suppose, from the clamour for action by the council on the climate emergency, and this demonstrates that that's what's going on. If we could move on to the next slide. So yeah, we had 80 groups respond, which is unprecedented, and we were really chuffed with the response that we got from all of the community groups. And what this slide shows is the range of different areas of activity that that groups are already working on or are interested in working on more. And so what we did was we organised an event which took place on the 6th of October. It was an online community networking event. We invited all those people who participated in the survey to join us for that. And it was a bit of an experiment. We did it on Zoom. We weren't quite sure how it was going to work because we wanted to run not just a session where we were all talking together, but some breakout groups around some of those particular themes that were of interest to the people coming along. And I don't know if you've been involved in a Zoom breakout group where you suddenly are zoomed into another little group to have a chat, but it's quite strange, but it worked really well. People had very good conversations, and the upshot of that was, I think, more networking has happened as a result. And even in the meeting itself, we could see in the chat that people who'd met in one of the breakout groups were having an ongoing conversation about how they could work together or were sharing information and so on. And that's what we want to help that to happen, and that's why we had that event. And we will be doing more to help spread expertise and experience between all the organisations out there. And Sarah's preempting me because she's put something up on the chat which I'm just about to explain. So if we move to the next slide, the current tally that we have is that 9 parishes in Bath, North East Somerset have declared a climate emergency so far. If you know of any more that are planning to do so, do let us know, and because we're very keen to support more parishes to do so. And the event that's listed there, which Sarah has just put the details of up in the chat. We have organised an event that's going to be run by the Centre for Sustainable Energy, who are a Bristol-based organisation that do fantastic work around all of this stuff. They've developed a workshop specifically for parish councils to help them with climate and ecological emergency action planning. It's on the 26th of November. It'll be an online thing. I don't think they're using Zoom, but it's another technology. And it's from 10 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. And I think what I want to encourage you to think about, and to encourage parish councillors to think about, is don't worry if you're not sure whether you want to declare a climate emergency or not in your parish. Go along if you're interested in finding out what it might mean, as well as going along there to find out what you need to do and how you can do it if you have already declared. It's very much about trying to help people to understand what it means, because I've heard some people, I've had questions actually directly from some parishes, some of whom have now declared, that were really worried about making a commitment that they then felt they couldn't actually deliver on at parish level. And I think what's really important to understand is that every action counts, and that and I think as the slides I've shown you already show, is that there's a very wide range of things that are relevant to delivering change in terms of the climate and in terms of the ecological emergency. We've got a parish toolkit which we produced last year and which we keep updating. It's on the council's website. If you go to the climate emergency button, you'll be able to find the parish council toolkit. And in that, we've got lots of links to useful organisations that can help you with thinking this through. And we've also got a lot of examples of actions that are being taken by parishes already in Baines, and so you can link up with those. And it gives examples of the kinds of projects. So some of them are where a parish council has helped to convert the street lights that they're responsible for to LED lighting, which is much more climate friendly, or have got involved in developing a renewable energy project, possibly helped by Bath and West Community Energy or Keynsham Community Energy, local tree planting, nature conservation, all of those kinds of things. Local food growing is also really important. We need to do much more than that. We're far too dependent on imported fruit and vegetables from places where climate change is likely to really affect the security of that food supply. And we used to be almost self-sufficient, certainly in this district, for fruit and veg, if you look back to the 1950s, and we need to recreate that. So I think that's an area of great opportunity. So you don't need to be an expert on technical stuff around renewable energy or how to reduce carbon emissions in housing. There are lots of other things you could be looking at in terms of those kinds of things about, waste. Waste is a very important part of it as well, and transport. So do have a look at the website if you've got a parish that's you're from a parish that's interested, and then do think about coming along to that 26th of November workshop. It's for you. And at the moment, Michaela from my team, who's running this, has said to me, she gave me an update just before the meeting, is we've got 29 people signed up for the event so far, which means we've got about 15 places left. And so far we've got 17 parish councils represented. So there's room for more. So please do take advantage of that. And then if we could just move on to the next slide, Sarah. I just wanted to just tell you a bit more about a few other bits of work that we've been doing behind the scenes. My team has been leading on, which is all going to help in terms of what we do next as a council on the climate emergency. One is a study that we've commissioned into the renewable energy target. When we did our work last year on the carbon footprint, as Sarah said at the beginning, what it identified for us was that we not only needed to reduce carbon emissions from buildings and transport, but we needed to massively increase renewable energy that is zero carbon. And the study that we did showed approximately how much more renewable energy we need in the district, which, just to give you the sort of scale of it, is we currently have about 24 megawatts of renewable energy produced in Bath and North East Somerset, and we need to get it up to at least 300 megawatts by 2030. So that's a very big increase. But it's also what we need to understand is what kind of investment does that represent, and how can we make that happen, and to what degree can it be delivered through community energy, because we're, as you know, we're an area that has really shown leadership on that through the work of Bath and West Community Energy, and then more recently as well, Keynsham Community Energy, obviously. And we think there's a very big role for community energy where the project's owned by the local community, and the community has a real say in what it looks like and where it is, and it gets all of the benefits from that project. But we think there are other things that we probably need to do as a council to look at whether it's worth us investing in it, or whether there's private sector partners we should be working with, or are there financial instruments we should be looking at, such as, for example, issuing municipal bonds. So we're having a look at all of that in that study to help inform that conversation about what we should do to enable more of that to happen. And then I've got a parallel piece of work underway under the sort of green recovery heading. And this is, I don't know how much you've picked up in the media about this idea of green recovery, but there was, for a period of time, there was an awful lot of it going on, including, to my surprise, I was listening to the radio one morning, and a former deputy governor of the Bank of England was suddenly on saying, no, what the government needs to do is not put loads of money into big infrastructure projects if they want to recover quickly from the economic impact of COVID, because that takes too long and there aren't that many jobs and it's years down the line. What you need to do is wholesale energy efficiency retrofitting of the whole country's housing stock, and that would be giving you jobs that are quick and easy for people to get the skills they need in, and the projects can be rolled out very fast. And I thought that was really interesting. That's a real change in kind of knowledge and understanding about what the actions we need to take on the climate emergency could be doing in terms of benefiting our economy, whereas so often in the past this has been talked about in terms of it costing too much. On the contrary, actually the actions that we need to take are going to have really great benefits for our economy, and so what I'm getting commissioned is a study that looks at, if we can deliver on our climate targets of 300 megawatts of renewable energy and 65,000 homes retrofitted and so on, what could that mean if we do it right in terms of new jobs in Bath and North East Somerset, new opportunities for young people, new careers, and what does it mean in terms of social and economic benefits for the economy at large. So that both of those studies will report in January, and that second one, if we can move on to the next slide now, is specifically to feed into this renewal vision work, which Sarah mentioned at the beginning. So this is a new piece of work that's been set up, as she said, since well, I think May was when we first started this work, It's part of a big renewal program that covers things like the reopening of high streets, doing things safely as things reopened after the first lockdown. Those people are very, very busy now in supporting businesses with the second lockdown. And it's about looking. There's a work stream that's around community resilience, and that's based around the new community wellbeing hub that has been supporting initially all the people that were shielded in the first lockdown, but they're doing pretty much the same thing again in the second lockdown. And then the renewal vision is the third strand of this renewal program of work, which I'm leading on. And this is about basically saying that we need to have a clearer vision of what kind of place we want to have and what we want to be in Bath North East Somerset. And we need to involve more people in the community in developing that vision. And so, and this is based around, as I said, the fact that we know that we need, what the pandemic has shown up is some of the weaknesses in our economy because we're so dependent on retail and tourism. The theory is that if we could move towards a greener local economy, that would also help us to develop a more diverse and resilient one. So that's some of the thinking behind it. And as Sarah also said, is that we saw some positive changes in terms of reduction in commuting, and some of that has sustained, although not all of it. And we've learned how to work from home, which has obviously its ups and its downsides. But we need to build on some of that positive behaviour change. So we're going to be looking at that as well. And all of this is also informed by the council's target that's contained in our corporate strategy of delivering that 2030 net zero carbon target. So if we move to my last slide, Alan will be pleased to hear. Finally, I just want to say that in terms of that renewal vision piece of work, we've just completed a stakeholder engagement exercise with about almost 60 different individuals being interviewed across the whole district from all sorts of different sectors. That has informed the development of sort of 4 themes that have come out from those conversations about what people want to see happening in terms of their local neighbourhood, in terms of how we could be leading in terms of innovation in our district, in terms of how we could fund things in a fairer way, and so on. So these 4 themes have emerged. And my team is just working on developing some public engagement work now as part of this second stage, in which we will give anyone who wants to in the community the opportunity to comment on those themes and to put forward their own ideas. So watch out for that. That'll be coming very soon in the next couple of weeks online. And it will be via the council website, and we'll be promoting it to you. So I know that Alison and Sarah will let you know when that's ready to go. So I think I'll finish there. Thank you, Alan.
Jane, thank you very much. We have time for some questions. I am intent that we finish on time at 7:30. I have 4 people listed for questions. And then I know there is one very short presentation. So that's one presentation, but could the other 4 be questions, please? Not long statements. So we'll start with Ron Hopkins, who I have at the top.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, it's you, Ron.
Okay. This is not a statement. I understand your urgency to get shut, but we've listened patiently to Jane and her colleague talking about lots of jingoistic attitudes about the ecology of the area and recovering things. Yet I'm staggered to find out that Baines are actively considering planning permission on a power station in Midsummer Norton, in the middle of the Somer Valley, which over the course of its lifetime will release 750,000 tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. How the hell can you condone that? Why hasn't it been rejected out of hand?
Okay, should we let Jane answer that then, or Sarah, one or the other?
Do you want me to take it?
Yeah, if you would.
Sarah,
Ron, can you mute your speaker, please?
So, Ron, the difficulty that we have, this is obviously not a decision that that I feel comfortable with in the context of the climate emergency. But the difficulty we have around planning is that the role of the council is one of a quasi-judicial process of implementing the planning policy that exists. So we are in the process of updating our planning policy as fast as we can to reflect the climate and ecological emergencies. But in the meantime, unfortunately, we're still working to what feel now like rather outdated planning policies that unfortunately didn't have anything specific in them that prevented this from going ahead. And the council doesn't unfortunately have any leeway at all to deviate from implementing planning policy. Otherwise, legal action will be taken against us. But what I would say is that we are now in communication with Conrad Energy, who are the company who obtained the planning permission, and we hope to work with them to, we hope to reach a solution that might be less environmentally damaging than the plant that currently has permission.
Thank you, Sarah. Next question is from Nick Duncan.
Sorry, I seem to be talking quite a lot this time. I've been at Avonmouth Fire Station, and I had to go to a site that pyrolyzed plastic. So that's breaking down solid plastic to a gas and then converting it back to a liquid and breaking up plastic into diesel, kerosene, that thing. And diesel works cleaner than normal diesel, and it's a way of recycling the plastic. It's not perfect. It's just, I wonder if you'd come across that idea and whether that was of any interest to you. That's it, basically.
Thank you, Nick. Who would like to answer that, Jane or Sarah?
I'll take it. We have a very strong waste policy around recycling, and at the moment, the best view that the best advice that we have at the moment is that burning plastic is really not a very good idea, and this is just another form of burning it. But I hadn't heard of that one, to tell you the truth. So if you want to send me the details, I will take that back and talk to the waste team about it. But on the whole, I would say that it's better to really focus on the recycling and reducing the use of single-use plastics is the very, very first thing that we have to do, and stop dropping it in the street and all that kind of thing, which I know we've got some great projects in the Keynsham area, for example, that's worked really well on that in terms of changing people's behaviour. So try and avoid using it as much as you possibly can, we do recycle the rest that is collected, and I think recycling it for reuse as new products is probably, from what I know, environmentally better than basically turning it back into a fossil fuel, which is what this sounds like. But send me the details and I will look at it and talk to my waste colleagues who are more expert than me on it.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Jane. Scott Anderson, your question, please.
I did put a couple on there while we were listening along. I went to a couple of the low traffic neighborhood presentations, and I know they've now been, it looks like they've been rebranded as livable streets. It seemed like all of that would only happen within Bath and within the Bath kind of limits. It didn't sound like there was anything for the outlying areas, even though we could be quite a good test bed. And my other question was about speed limits, because all of the changes have been made to pavements, creating extra space, but nothing's been done. And I know you need to go through highways with the bylaws to change them, but it just seems like quite a good opportunity not to be missed to improve our environment and our neighbourhood.
Thank you, Scott. I don't know whether that was a statement or a question, but does either of you want to try and answer that?
I'll have a go if you like. So it's Sarah here. So the livable neighbourhoods. I mean, this is a policy. So essentially, it's a way of cutting off rat runs to through vehicle traffic in order to make the residential neighbourhoods that would have been on the rat run pleasanter neighbourhoods to walk and cycle in, and where these have been implemented. So there are some in place in Britain and many more abroad. And what we tend to find is that, so initially in the first days and weeks, cars that would otherwise have gone along the rat runs can finish up on the main roads, and initially the traffic can increase on the main roads, but over time, as people become more confident that they can walk and cycle more safely, that does drop off, and it's a way of bringing about a mode shift from driving to walking and cycling, and there's good evidence supporting that has worked pretty well in lots of places. So the places I think where they have mostly been implemented have been urban. But that is not to say, I mean, certainly the towns outside of Bath would be obvious places. If you can see places in your local area that have rat runs through residential neighbourhoods, there's nothing constraining us to only implementing them in Bath. So as a group of residents, if you want to come forward and suggest alternative locations, then the council will be happy to consider them. And
my question is, why haven't you already looked as an option?
Scott, can we do it through the chair? And you've had your questions. Sarah's trying to answer them. If there is a supplementary question, perhaps you could put it into writing and send it to Sarah. Okay.
Shall I answer? Shall I respond, Alan?
No, we'll move on. You've answered the questions that were asked, and we now have Hal McPhee.
And I think you're going to tell me I haven't got time, Chairman. I was going to mention the 3 priorities that came up from my survey of councillors. Number 1, and this was for North East Somerset. Number 1 was to encourage people to switch to electric vehicles. Number 2 was in the Somer Valley, which was to build and strengthen the walking and cycling network, which the councillors thought was the absolute top priority. And for Keynsham, it was to consider bus stops on the bypass, which would give us access to an extra 54 services each day in both directions.
Hal, thank you for that. You never mentioned Christmas tree, so that was good. I don't think there was a question in there, but we're grateful for the information that you've put down. I'm sure that you will or have shared that with Sarah. So I think we can move on if that's okay with you. I'll take that as a yes. Okay, I'm now going to ask Clarice Corfield. She has some information to impart to us, and then I'm going to hand over to Linda Robertson to conclude. So, Clarice, you have the floor. Have you gone home, Clarice? Nobody goes home because they're already there, aren't they? But
she's muted.
Clarice, you need to unmute. We're just going to try and...
Sorry about that. Sorry. Thank you, Alan. I'm here more to gather information than anything else. I am the chair of the Church Together in Keynsham and Salford, and we are planning to do, together with the Keynsham Town Council, an Environment Day for the community next year, next summer, if possible, if not for the 2022. And it will be a kind of one Saturday, maybe afternoon or something, that we are going to have a fair, kind of fair in the high street with the aim of raising awareness about climate change and giving the residents ideas of what they can do in their private lives, and information about local energy, about electric bikes, about about consuming less food and things like that. So I'm here today because I would like very much to know what is happening already in the area. And that's it, Alan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clarice. As you can see, there are hundreds here tonight. So I'm not going to ask for a response over this forum, but equally, if people have other things that are happening, perhaps you could, and I'll sort of duck if there's a hand coming out, but perhaps you could email Sarah, perhaps. I don't see a thumb yet, there's a thumb going up. So if you could, if there are things happening in relation to what Clarice was talking about, then if you send those to Sarah, and Sarah will, I'm sure, liaise with Clarice, and I suspect that Sarah will be eager to give support to that event as well. So I've come to the end of my part, and so I'm going to hand over to Linda Robertson to bring the meeting to a close.
And thank you very much, Alan. It's been a brilliant idea that we can have this joint meeting. So thank you to everyone who came tonight. It's been good. And I think this is the first meeting we've ever had joint, isn't it? And it's lovely. So thank you to you, Alan, Chair of the Keynsham Area Forum, and also our Vice Chairs, Ron Hopkins and Adrian Inca. So obviously we all know the council will be holding a series of budget meetings in December. So everyone will be notified of those dates very soon. But we, generally speaking, won't be meeting again until next year. Unless, of course, there's a specific topic or an issue that needs to come to us all so that we can get back together again. So that's it really, because I'm certainly not going to gabble on a bit more because it'll take you over your 7:30. So thank you again, everybody, for coming. And as we're all saying at the moment, please keep safe and we'll see you all in the new year. Thank you.